Okay, now in part 3 of what is sharding, we're going to get into what are the questions that we need to ask in order to know whether it's right for us or not. So we've covered what sharding is. We've also covered some concerns with developers, as well as sometimes the Agile methodology. I'm a big fan of Agile methodology. I just think it definitely comes with that client concern. And we're going to get into, especially in technology, there's not really one answer for everything. It's seldom that black and white. So what we want to know is, how would we know when it's right for our environment, or what are some questions that we can ask so that we can get in the habit of knowing if sharding is right, let's say this year, maybe next year, or maybe not in a long time. And so keep in mind that depending on our environment, depending on how much data we have, it may not actually be a very good solution. And I've worked in environments where, we had, like 100 meg of data. I mean, that's not very big. All the way to environments where, I can't remember whatever is above a terabyte, but, where it was 2,000 terabytes, whatever that is, a petabyte or something of data, petabytes of data. So the idea is that there's huge data environments, and they may be looking at some of these drastic solutions, and then there's environments that are really small. And why someone with 100 meg of data is going to consider sharding is absurd. But again, it depends. What's their hardware like? So these are the questions to ask. And the first one is, what is the growth rate of your data? And that includes, what is the growth rate per day, per month, per quarter, per year? What is the pattern of this growth rate? So, and by the way, this is a question that I look at even when I'm investigating stocks, when I'm investigating bonds, when I'm investigating real estate, when I'm investigating businesses to invest in. Growth rate is always going to be important because there's two things about it. Number one, it does not ever grow consistently. Everybody knows if you're in any industry, there's going to be growth periods, and there's going to be periods where there's no growth, or there's going to be let's say, negative growth, shrinking, basically. Think of the S&P 500 as a case in point, just as a related example. And imagine that we had a data growth that was similar to the S&P 500, right? Where we had about 8 years that it was up, it was higher, it was growing at about 9% a year, and then 2 years where it contracted. Well, it would be the same thing with data. For instance, we have 8 years where we have a 9 to 11% growth of our data consistently, and then 2 years where the data actually contracts, right? This is generally what happens in environments. It may be over a 2-year period of time. It may be over a 5-year, 6-year period of time. Who knows? But there's going to be an overall pattern of this growth rate. And if we start to see geometric increases, especially, let's say, from month to month, from day to day, from quarter to quarter, from year to year, that can be a concern. That can kind of tell us, okay, we need to start thinking ahead for our environment. The next question to ask is, what plans do you have for hardware upgrades or environment expansion? This is a big deal. A lot of people are throwing everything on the cloud. I'm not a huge fan of the cloud. That's because I work in the financial industry. If I were to tell my clients, hey, I'm going to go put some of your data in the cloud, they would fire me immediately. Why do you think financial clients, especially wealthy financial clients, don't want their data in the cloud, right? So some people will be like, well, we don't need to look at this second option here because we're not going to do any hardware. If you want to go throw everything in the cloud, that's great. Just make sure your clients are going to be okay with that. Because if your clients find out you're putting data in the cloud and they're not okay with that, you might end up getting fired. And that's a big concern. The cloud, as I say this to people, more often than not, is not a solution. And it's only going to be one major issue that happens with the cloud before that's all going to go under. So especially if you have financial clients, you better get their sign-off ahead of time. Because I'm going to tell you, I would not bank with anyone who puts data in the cloud at all. Like, I would close my accounts to them immediately. And a lot of clients, especially wealthy clients, they would be thoroughly ticked off if you did that. It's just a concern. If you're going to have financial clients, you're going to have to build an environment for them. They're going to be more profitable, of course, but you're going to have to build an environment for them. Number 3, when will the next migration occur? We're not going to stick around with version Mongo 1.8 all the time, or SQL Server 2005. Eventually, we're going to upgrade, right? And we're going to have to migrate those data. When is that going to be? What type of environment is that going to look like? We may want to upgrade because the next edition of Mongo or the next edition of SQL Server is going to be really cool. It's going to allow us to do some really new things. Okay? But when will that be? When is our next expected migration? And these two, by the way, point 2 and point 3, often go hand in hand. And then, of course, the fourth one, which is really big, is who do you consult with before executing decisions? You know, people hire me as a consultant a lot, not because I know everything, but because I'll come into their environment and I see, because I'm not working in their environment, I'll see things that they don't pick up on. Likewise, having some people in-house is very helpful. Okay, if you have some in-office consultants or basically in-office workers, that's great. They know their environment, but that external consultant can often say, okay, here's the 2 weaknesses of your plan, this and this. Let's go ahead and let's build it this way so that we mitigate those risks, right? So the key here is that you definitely want to have some in-office and out-of-office consulting going on. And yes, the in-office people are going to be the experts, but getting that extra perspective, especially, again, going back to having financial clients, having bigger clients, those decisions are going to save your clients huge headaches later on, and they're going to end up saving you a huge amount of money. If you're working in a bigger data environment, you know that the out-of-office consultants are totally worth it in the long run because, again, they come from that other perspective. So getting a combination, because once you're ready to execute, you're going to execute. These are 4 big questions to really ask before you consider sharding. It's not that sharding is not a solution. It's a very good solution. Does it make sense for your environment? It's not this one answer of yes, it always works, yes, it's always good. Not always. There are situations when it's a very useful solution, and there are situations when it's not a useful solution.